All right, welcome back to Having a Ball. Today is a special kind of episode because we have a guest, a special guest, Rick 9G, who has a very fun YouTube video or channel where I discovered and learned a lot about Lucy myself. And I think a lot of Lucy fans have, even though it's not just Lucy covers, other shows. So we're excited to have you.
Well,
Yes,
thank you so
hello.
much. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So I guess we'll just jump right into it. Um, what explain a little bit about like what you do and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, I have been doing or working on my YouTube channel since 2016. And so my passion has always been classic TV shows and movies. And the funny thing, it was never something that I would even tell my best friends. It was something that, of course, my family, my friends,
Yeah.
my family knew about. But like even my best friends didn't know. And I thought, what the heck? I should just make a video on something that I think is fun. I Love Lucy, my favorite show of all time. And I don't know, I knew about a couple guest stars who were on the show. I made a video on it, didn't think too much of it. When I checked it out, I said, oh my goodness, this video has tens of thousands of views, right? It was kind of a shock. And that's kind of how it started. So it started with that video, and that's been years ago. And I continue to cover other shows like I Love Lucy, but that continues to be my favorite show.
So that was your first ever video, was an I Love Lucy related one?
Not video ever. I used to do gaming on the channel, just like play video games, nothing really crazy. The channel, of course, it was just okay. It wasn't doing too well, but I don't know. It was one of those things where it was like something wasn't being completely satisfied in me. I was like, I want to talk about something I'm really passionate about. And when I did that, it showed results. So I was really happy about that.
Now you're a young guy, so these are not shows from your childhood. Were you introduced to these via your parents, your grandparents, or just yourself? You just started watching all these classic TV shows.
Yeah, that's always a funny story because everyone would think, well, of course your parents, Rick, showed you these, or even your grandparents, just like you said. But no, that
Yeah.
wasn't the case. My dad on his own loved things like the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers, but that's about it. And that was because he saw it in his native Argentina. He used to watch them and they were dubbed in Spanish. But no one in my family that I know of really watched I Love Lucy except for like an uncle here and there, maybe an auntie.
Yeah.
And I started watching it after Saturday morning cartoons. They would just put it on and I stayed and I continued watching and I fell in love with it.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're all the same type of people. So I think we find a fascination that, with those classic television shows that a lot of people don't, and we find each other somehow.
Oh yeah.
That way.
I was just thinking about, I mentioned that I Love Lucy was introduced to me through my family. But MASH is a show that my brother and I found at the library. Like we used to
Wow.
go to the library and find like DVDs, and we just sat up one night and
I remember
literally
libraries.
watched. So yeah, I remember those.
Yeah.
We watched so many of them, and that's how like my love for MASH came about. And it's just kind of crazy that you can thankfully we have all of these documented and on video so we can watch them. But yeah, a lot of people don't know the depth of my love for a lot of these older shows.
Yeah, and I think like what Rick does on his channel is it's not so much the comedy, the scripted show as they go throughout the episode. It's really behind the scenes stuff that's more fascinating. At least to me it is that maybe the bloopers, the trivia, but also what it took to make these shows. And I think, Rick, you go into a lot of that with like Desilu Productions and behind the scenes, how it came to be, to put the show together.
Right. And I think as a casual watcher, I would say when I was younger, of course, I was a casual watcher. I kind of stopped watching through high school. And the reason was because of the 2003 documentary movie. And that was kind of a shock to me in what was going on and all this tumultuousness. And I kind of stopped watching the show. And so that led me to kind of wonder a little bit about, well, what was really happening, And so I did my own investigations, my own research, and then I brought it to my channel and people were really just interested and shocked at some of the things that happened. some of the things maybe that they were surprised didn't happen and vice versa.
Yeah, that movie I've seen. I think you're talking about. I think it's just called Lucy with the
Yeah.
actress. Is it Rachel York? She played her. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay,
That's right.
and I think I've seen many people try to emulate Lucille Ball, and no one can. And we've gotten into discussions about Nicole Kidman, but I realize it's a whole other thing she's trying to do. But with the Rachel York character in that movie, I think that's the closest I've seen to the height, the comedy, physical, ability to do what Lucy did. So that movie did open up my eyes a little bit for that. But the backstory is really sad because I think she was just playing out what she wanted to happen in her real life, with her husband.
Yeah, it was kind of like you mentioned, it was kind of jolting, and it was that shock of, yes, it's a show, but then you're saying, but what's going behind the scenes? And so is there any genuine feeling to what is going on, or is this all a show? And then of course you start finding out what's going on and the passion they actually put into an episode, 26 and a half minutes. And you say, whoa, well, regardless of what was going on, these people were great and they were professionals. Yeah. And they had to turn off that personal switch and get on camera and play these characters. And I think many people don't realize they are characters.
Yeah.
In the sense of they're almost completely different from how they are, maybe minus Fred, but
yeah. I think we've discussed in the William Frawley profile we did. He's the exact same person that he is on screen that he was in real life, just grumpy and just unhappy.
Yeah. Grumpier and more expletives.
Now I see that you also get into breaking down like their salaries, the set designs. Yeah. I think you even visited the Desilu, or what was the Desilu studios. What's that like? Because just watching you or other people who have gone to these places, the historical places, it does something to you because, history was made there.
Yeah, that was something that I think came to me because I realized I grew up in Los Angeles, and, being driven around town by my mom when I was a little boy, you would just pass these places and it's, your hometown, quote unquote. But then doing all this research, I'm like, wait, next to that bakery where I always drove by, that's where they filmed Laurel and Hardy. What? Wait, I Love Lucy is like 10 blocks away from so-and-so. And so cool. When I would go there, I would be like, when you would drive there, you never realize that there's no sign out there that's advertising this is what the location is. But after doing this research and you go there and you touch the building, the actual building, and can't really go inside, but you feel something there. And it's fantastic to be able to be part of that history, knowing that other people can't visit for many different reasons. And I thought, why don't I bring that to the channel, being able to go to these places, talking about, where the history was made, not only just the show itself.
And Ziva, you've seen some of those, right? The backstage where people are piling in to see the show in real time.
Yes,
I have. Yeah. And I definitely, so that's like a goal, is to get out there and see a bunch of stuff. Like we'll just roll it into the podcast where we have like a visit and then we can talk all about it.
Yeah. But Palm Springs, like I'm here in California, and we've got Palm Springs, which they have properties here, and down here in the Inland Empire where it's near me. For legal purposes, I may or may not have trespassed onto a Arnaz ranch, and taken photos. And what's funny is that no one around the residential area even knows the gem that they're surrounded by. And it was a former, horse breeding ranch of Desi Arnaz. So, a geek like me will find something like that and get excited. But yeah, what other type of shows do you cover other than Lucy? I know you do the Andy Griffith, and you do, like you said, the Three Stooges.
Yeah, there's many that I cover, and I think a big staple of my channel is that I actually love and watch these shows. And why I say that is because I'm really passionate about what I show. And so there's a real interest in like, hey, this is a topic I want to show, and I show it. It's not just thinking, hey, what show have I never covered? I don't know much about this. So these are shows that I've already watched. So like things like I mentioned, of course, I Love Lucy, Hogan's Heroes, 90s shows as well, like Family Matters. The Twilight Zone's not really a sitcom, but I really love that whole, series there. And there's just so many, and I'm kind of constantly adding others that I've watched as a little boy and kind of sprinkling them in as I go along.
And of course, the connection of Desilu Productions with all of these shows, that either they're filmed, some are on the lot, or like when Lucy brought Star Trek to the world,
Yeah.
And I think Ziva, those are some of the things that fascinate you too. The kind of like what Lucy brought to television.
Yeah, I love how influential she was, and how, like Rick was saying, I mean, when you're younger, you just appreciate her for her acting skills, and she's funny and she's a great character. But as you get older and you start, looking into what she went through, how much work that they all put in, you start seeing, a more three-dimensional person, because and this happens, I think, with a lot of shows, you kind of forget that the actors are people, and they have their own lives, they have their own stuff that they're dealing with, and so it's just super easy to idolize and make this person amazing, and then you start realizing there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and she's still amazing even after everything else.
And I think sometimes the frustrating part is that sometimes non-coverage of Desi Arnaz and what he created as well. Although, I mean, among us, we do really praise the work, but for the most part, it's just seen as a character like a Ricky Ricardo. But for goodness sakes, he was quite the brains behind a lot of that, and his story from, the ruins of Cuba to, all the way to, like he says, cleaning canary cages,
creating mosaic,
tiles. Yeah. You'll hear that in the profile of Desi Arnaz. But all the little business, mindset he had from the very start. He didn't let himself feel sorry for himself. I think that was instilled in him from his father. And he brought that to Lucy. So together they were quite the team to make this, huge juggernaut that was Desilu Productions. But unfortunately, behind the scenes was, another sad story.
Yeah, I think that what happened is, definitely unfortunate, but I mean, what they did throughout the course of their marriage, and even afterwards, because they were great friends afterwards, I really think that they could not have done it without the other. And that's not putting either of them down. It's literally saying they need each other, right? Like Desi in the background stuff and all the business stuff. I mean, that wasn't Lucy's forte, at least initially.
Right.
But then Lucy was essentially the star. She was like, well, I'm not doing this without him. And so the fact that they were both, it was very much like a yin and yang thing that I think was a beautiful just legacy that they left.
Right. And once, of course, they divorced and it all kind of, not fell apart, but, kind of separated, she had to become, the stronger, more dominant person because she bought him out and took over that role. But also to the show, the relationship between Bill and Viv, I think we've both discussed what that was. And it's so interesting that they were able to just turn it on and turn it off for the show, because in real life they weren't, the best of friends.
Yeah, and they were the veterans. I mean, they were the ones who, I mean, Vivian having her, background in theater and so forth, and Bill just being in so many movies. It's one of those things where it's like with anyone, right? Whether that's like a teacher or a doctor, when you go in there, a good one does their job, right? And so that's what these individuals will do. It's a good actor does their job, delivers their lines on time. What happened last night really doesn't matter. What happens is right in front of the cameras, and that's what counts. And then when you say,
Yeah. Oh,
there we go.
Is everyone back? Okay.
We're all back.
That was odd. Okay, I'm sorry.
I kept
I don't
hearing Rick but you were frozen.
I
So.
disappeared. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, the last I heard was the veterans.
Oh, okay.
We'll edit this.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
No, just leave the break in.
Just
It's
the frozen.
But okay, so Rick, a little bit about the show. What do you have a favorite episode? I feel like that's a hard question for some people, but do you have one that you're like, yes, or at least a top few?
Yes, I've noted that, as let's say my I Love Lucy watching career has gone on, I've gone back and forth between different episodes. I think I started out with the ones that everyone knew about, Vitamin Benjamin and the chocolate episode. But then as I got more into the show, I started appreciating the other episodes that maybe aren't that quote unquote well known, but they're fantastic. Like home movies. Right now, home movies, I'm obsessed with that one.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wish more people would see it, or more people would just like recall what would happen in that episode. It's fantastic. I also love LA at Last. It's one of my favorites. And the John Wayne double two-parter.
Oh yeah.
It's like excellent.
The Duke. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what's great about the Hollywood ones is that they were able to, bring on their real life friends and pretend that they're starstruck when really they're probably the larger of this. Well, maybe no. I mean, John Wayne, same caliber, but it's funny to watch Lucy, of course, fall over all of these people.
And I love how starstruck she gets.
Yeah. Or Harpo Marx with the, they're both duetting each other. And then, of course, she slips up at the end. But yeah, those Hollywood one with the Rock Hudson on there. I think you just had a Rock Hudson video, right? You just posted one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always appreciated watching that Palm Springs episode. When I think Ethel offers him candy and she says, "You want some rock, Mr. Candy?" That's always funny. But so do you get any kind of odd, you bring like a joyful type of channel because of these shows. Do you get any negative feedback? And if you do, what would it possibly be?
Yeah, I think that's something that is very interesting because, negative feedback or even constructive criticism, there's a fine line there, but it definitely happens. I think any YouTuber would say that doesn't happen is not telling the truth. And the thing is, it's one of those things where you look at it and it has to slide right off you. You have to be Teflon when it comes to comments like that, because I think the people who do reach out and do say positive things is so overwhelming that everyone else gets droned out. And I think that's what's important. And yes, there's negative feedback. And what's really funny is when someone says, "Oh, I can't stand your voice." And then you hear someone else say, "Oh, I love your voice." And then you go from the point of like, well, I guess someone is right. Or maybe, you know what? Some people just maybe don't like it, and that's fine. And other people do. And the fact is not everyone's going to like everything. And so I make things that I enjoy and my audience came to me. And so I think that's essential, that if they're going to continue to enjoy it, then I'm still doing a good job.
Now, the movie that has caused quite the stir. Ziva, are you a fan of the casting? We haven't discussed that.
I'm trying to hold out hope. I think it's very easy to pass judgment. Definitely with just stills, of this is what she looks like in her makeup, and
it's very frustrating to read.
You don't know what her acting is in this role. And I think Lucy Arnaz did bring up the fact that that they're not trying to recreate her mother,
right?
And they're not trying to tell the story that everyone knows. They're trying to tell the story that a lot of people don't know,
right?
And I think that as long as they're given that platform, there is a possibility that they could do really good, and there's a possibility that they could flunk. So I'm not a huge fan of the casting, but I'm not there working with them, so I'm kind of just holding out hope, and we'll see what it's like once it comes out. I guess I definitely am gonna watch it and see. What about you, Rick?
Yeah, I made a video on that and I gave my extensive thoughts on that. I think that, giving a summary of what I said, I think that my love comes from the actual art of what the shows were. and everything branches out from there. So essentially what I've learned about the actors and so forth, I've already learned. And so, they're going to give their artistic representation of that, and they should do that, right? It's art. Everyone should, right, have the creativity to make their art. So yeah, I think people will enjoy it. I think other people won't enjoy it. I think I'll pop in an I Love Lucy episode and watch that myself.
Yeah.
That's probably what I'll go to.
Yeah. And I think when I first initially saw that, I had the same reaction that everybody did, because you don't know what the premise is until someone tells you, here's the synopsis of what we're doing. She's not trying to be Lucy Ricardo. She's trying to be Lucille Ball. And those two people were vastly different,
Right.
Characters. Lucy was goofy, silly. That's hard to emulate by itself. But Lucille Ball, the character, was a very non-funny person, very stern. Even her voice changes when you hear her speak in a non-Lucy Ricardo voice. So the time period that they're trying to hit on is during the Red Scare, when she went through that drama of being called a communist. And that has nothing to do with the I Love Lucy show, other than perhaps it was happening during the time that it was on the air. So it was kind of like, is this going to ruin our show? What's happening? And they handled it with such grace. And, Desi's famous line, the only thing red about her is her hair. And even that's not, red or real or something like that. But so Nicole Kidman is a top-notch actress, Academy Award winning. I love all of it. So, but it did strike me a little bit odd. She, will she play her part? Just like Lucille Ball? Probably, because I've seen her transform into a lot of things. Javier Bardem, I don't know. I mean, I've heard him. I know his accent, and it's a Spanish character. So these are professionals. I think they're going to do the story justice, especially since Lucy Arnaz has signed off on it. I think everybody else can probably just sit down and calm down and
calm the heck down.
Yeah. I think that's what she was politely trying to say. Like, if anyone knows my mother, it's probably me,
Yeah.
But,
and I think on the flip side, Rick, you're saying, I might just pop in an I Love Lucy episode. It's like, no one's forcing you to watch this. So if you don't like who they cast, or you're not going to like it, then don't watch it.
Yeah.
This is for people that want to learn more.
Exactly.
I think it's going to be interesting for me, and whether or not it's something that, I will watch multiple times, or that, I really, really like, who knows? But I'm definitely going to see, that side, learn more about that story. And so, yeah, I think it's just, I think a lot of people, we live in a world where a lot of people pass judgment very quickly on things that they don't know a whole lot about. And so,
I was excited at first because it was initially supposed to be Cate Blanchett, and I've seen her do, I was very excited when I saw it was Cate Blanchett, because I've seen her transform into so many characters. So when I saw that was off the table and it went to Nicole Kidman, I think we all had kind of like a what? But there was no, there's no comedy required, because even the storyline isn't funny. It's pretty sad and, drastic. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think I just love that they're doing it at all, because it's been so many years and we're still, I don't think the Lucy legacy will ever die, really.
Oh, yeah. I know when I was talking to you about, starting this podcast and just seeing if anyone was really interested in this subject at all,
There's a lot of us
just so surprised by how many people, that, and then going, why was I ashamed that I really love this show? Like, there's so many people out there. So, but it was surprising to me, I think, at the beginning, how many people were still, diehard fans.
Yeah. Now, behind me, I have my dolls back there that I collect. I don't know if you can see, but do you collect any sort of memorabilia? I'm not big on the memorabilia, but when I come across like a thrift shop, of course, or something, a yard sale, and they have something Lucy related, I'll pick it up. But I wonder, Rick, if you collect any sort of memorabilia for any of these things.
Yeah, I really don't. I'm not a big memorabilia person. I do have a few items here and there it's funny, like people, when they find out I like it, they're the ones who either send me stuff, whether it's family, friends, or even viewers sometimes. And that's always much appreciated. What I do really love, and I kind of still cherish, I will never sell that, but it's a clock that I bought at Universal Studios Hollywood when the Lucy store was there.
Mm-hmm.
And what was funny is I would be like the only one in there.
Oh my God, me too.
Right?
I hated that they closed it, because I did get a blanket from there, and I've never used it. It's just stored because it's precious. But I hate that they closed it, and I loved going in there. But the dresses, the museum type, displays that they would have in Universal Studios. But how about you, Ziva? Do you have a lot of stuff?
I don't. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about. I'm a very mid-century person, so I have a lot of mid-century stuff, and so sometimes they kind of just overlap well together. I do have. If you look on that Instagram, on our page, like one of the very first posts is a photo of like my old writing desk, and I had that all set up, and those are all from the scrapbooks that they had, which I just love. And so there's a bunch of stuff from that, but past books and things like that, I don't really have a whole lot of statues or memorabilia or anything like that. So
yeah, I think a lot of it gets watered down to be kind of like collector's items and cliche, just to kind of mass produce them and sell them, which it's a little corny. But I do appreciate the autobiographies, both Lucy and Desi's. I think I've read and audio book them quite a few times. But or the people actually involved, like Jess Oppenheimer's son's book, things like that, people who were actually there. That's always a nice take, because the writing in the I Love Lucy show itself, I know it carried on from the radio show to I Love Lucy to, is it Here's Lucy right after that? I forget the others because there's so many.
There was
the Lucy show.
So there were
or Life with Lucy.
4 that kind of felt, there were 4 that kind of followed that, and then there was Lucy. So I Love Lucy, the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, the Lucy show, Here's Lucy, and then there was that 4th one. Is that Life with Lucy?
Yeah,
the one that didn't do so well.
That had like 8 episodes or something like that. And I watched it. Have you guys watched it? The episodes, you can find them.
I wouldn't say I've ever sat through a whole episode of Life with Lucy, because I think I saw a documentary once where it was almost sad the way they were describing what the premise was, because it's like you're watching, I don't know, an 80-year-old Lucy Ricardo, and it just wasn't the same sparkle that it was in the early 50s, which comes with age, which comes with probably being tired, with probably the sign of the times, because it wasn't aired in the 50s. And so when you're trying to force the same character throughout decades, it probably loses a little bit of its luster from the original hit that it was.
Yeah, I do have to say that I thought she did a good job acting. One of the things that they mentioned, was the supporting cast. I don't think that they were as good. And I also think that one of the things she mentioned was that, people didn't really want to see her taking on an older role and being older, because that meant that, well, she was older, and whether or not that was reality, people didn't really want to see her in that role, if that makes any sense. They didn't want to see her being a grandma, because they wanted to keep her picture in the younger, more vibrant roles.
Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable to try and make a older lady do pratfalls or silly skits. It's just a little
plus and you see in Here's Lucy, I think in the 5th season, there's a decline in how physical her acting becomes because of that broken leg. And so even at the end of Here's Lucy, you start seeing less of that, being able to do the physical acting that she's so well known for and so used to doing. And so there's that as well, that they weren't able to do as much of that.
Yeah, I think do you cover any of the later shows or just the I Love Lucy show itself?
I have gotten into the Lucy show a bit, and Here's Lucy as well. I've a handful of videos on that, but that's something that I do want to get into more, because I was at that point where I said, oh, I don't know if I ever want to cover these shows. But then something in me kind of hit, and I did watch them as a little boy, but they were never as exciting to watch as when I Love Lucy came on, like just that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I saw them again, I could appreciate them for what they were. They were different. You can't expect the same thing, the same magic, but there is something very interesting about the celebrity she brought on, and just how her comedy kind of evolved, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
That is, you could appreciate, but then a little bit is lost, obviously, and then that you kind of feel as well. So it's a lot of kind of mixed emotions watching it.
Yeah, because I think obviously with I Love Lucy, her and Desi bounced off each other. It's just the yin and the yang of those two characters. Then you have your Fred and your Ethel. It was just beautifully made, that the bouncing off one another, even the two Mertz's relationship, worked perfectly. That when Ethel then became Viv in the later shows, it was like something was missing. And of course, it's because your mind is so predisposed to think that there's a Ricky and a Fred, which I'm sure they were trying to run away from being the same characters time and time again. But it's a testament to how great they made these characters, that we can't forget about what they are. But to me, the more fascinating part is the production of it, the backstage, behind the scenes, family, personal stuff that struggled to get it even off the ground. Just convincing the CBS that these two can be a couple. We go into that a little bit. It's so interesting how it's changed, the sign of the times, how it's changed, how things weren't acceptable then are acceptable now. What does something like that strike you, the difference of a 1950s household to today?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a feeling of, I mean, the show did something and it created a magic, and I really don't think that many shows can do that. And so I think it kind of glamorizes that 50s lifestyle that obviously we didn't live through, but then it's like we wish we could, kind of, by watching that.
Mm-hmm.
And then now there's no set, household that you look at. There's so much diversity, so much difference. And it's one of those things where it's like, I almost want to be in that household with them. I want to be in the other room while they're in the kitchen. I want to be in the other room, like waiting for them to come by, right?
Oh my God, how cool would that be?
Right? Like, I don't even need to be on camera. I just want to be in the next room, like,
there.
For them, right? And so it does create that. And it's one of those things where I think, as you mentioned, like the other shows kind of were grasping at that same feeling, and maybe they touched it, but they weren't able to completely just bring it home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, okay. I'm gonna teeny soapbox here. I actually, so the reason, because a lot of people ask me when I tell them that Here's Lucy's my favorite of all of them, they ask me why. Because they're like, well, there's I Love Lucy and blah blah blah, and I get that, and I love all the shows, and it's very hard for me to choose which one's my favorite a lot of times. But I just love I don't know. I love the woman. This is the second time now that she's been, a single mother. She's raising her children. I love that she has her own children on the show. I don't know. There's something about that like really helps me. At the beginning, they're both kind of a bit clunky. But I don't know that might be their first acting roles. Was the show. So, you start seeing them come into their own as actors and actresses. And I like in that one, I don't know. I felt like they weren't trying to grasp for the,
like
she needs a man. And like, this is this very happy, they are a happy family in an extent, but that you see a lot more of her outside of the home. And I kind of like that. So I like having two,
Like the independence
different.
that she kind of portrayed.
And I like having the two different shows, because I think if they had tried, like Rick was saying, tried to make it the same, you know, where she's at home and then all the antics are at home, it would have for sure been a hit and miss, you know, like they were like, well, we can't do the same thing. So I definitely understand what people say about how, you know, it's not the same, and it definitely isn't the same. You know, their first one, just like with almost any movie, I think the first, or movie or TV show, the first is like amazing. And then everything after that is kind of off of that. And so it's never the same or as good as the, you know, the original, if that makes
Yeah, you
sense.
have, like you mentioned, two vastly different scenarios happening, where she was more submissive as a wife, even though the whole premise of the show is that she's going against what Ricky wants anyway. So otherwise we wouldn't have a show, but they want you to believe that she is trying to be more of, you know, subservient or trying to make him happy. I mean, we just discussed the episode of Lucy thinks Ricky's trying to murder her, which is a whole thing in itself. But the point is that she was very accepting of her husband perhaps not liking her, and how to work around that and get him to like her again. And where it's probably like a here's Lucy, it was just her. It was just, you know, she's running the show, both on the show and behind the show. But I'm saying, as the character, she has to be stronger because she's just a single mom that isn't trying to please anybody. You know, it's just two vastly different characters.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes her boss, I want to say Mr. Mooney, but that's not right. That's from the Lucy show.
The Lucy show. Yeah.
Harrison Carter, right?
Yeah.
On Here's Lucy.
Yeah. And so I think, we just discussed the Lucy thinks Ricky is trying to murder her. Mm-hmm. And in that, it was such a dark concept that there's we spoke